Summit. So before we really dive into it, why don't you, I know I gave you a big intro, but tell us a little bit about yourself.
That intro was amazing, by the way. I'm a Detroit native through and through, and while I do live in the world of academia and practice as an advertiser, as a marketer, little known fact, Michael, at one time I wanted to be a songwriter. I was a songwriter. I was writing songs for a living, and I say the zenith of that career, which translated over to marketing in academia, was working in the music industry, working at Apple, doing partner marketing for iTunes, and then sort of reaching the zenith doing digital strategy for Beyonce. And I learned so much from that experience, learning about why people do what they do and how brands can activate people to take action. And and I think that has been sort of the through line, whether I'm in the classroom or I'm in the boardroom or on a stage. And I would arguably say that experience planted the seed, taught me a lot.
Well, it's great. And we're excited to have you join us today. So we have a lot of coaches out there, and, a lot of what they do is they have to build their own brands to attract people, to connect with people. And I know that we had this discussion, you did a lot of work with Beyonce to help launch and build her brand. And I'm just curious, are there parallels and strategies for how someone like Beyonce would build her brand and how a coach might approach building their brand?
Absolutely. And I will caveat this saying that Beyonce is Beyonce. Right? She's great. I don't want to take too much credit for anything. Beyonce is Beyonce. But what I found to be one of the most powerful things about Beyonce wasn't just the product, the music that she created or creates. It was really about her ideology, her belief. Right? If you know anything about Beyonce, she's been all about women's empowerment since Independence Ladies, since Survivor, to the left, Who Runs the World, Girls. Like, Beyonce has been all about women's empowerment. And she activates a network of people, a network tribe of people who see the world the way she does. And if you juxtapose Beyonce to her husband, Jay-Z, who is amazing, one of the best rappers ever, right? Jay-Z has a fan club. Beyonce has the Beehive. She has a tribe of people who subscribe to her belief. And they move in concert, not because of her products, but because of her ideology. So when I think about your coaches, you create great content, you do all those things that communicate the belief, but it's really about starting with an ideology, a way that you see the world. Then you identify the groups of people, the tribes that see the world the way you do, and then you preach the gospel. And the people who see the world the way you do will say, give me some more of that. And actually, they'll go invite more people to the party, people who are just like themselves. It's ideology that realize from work with someone who's amazing as Beyonce, that's what draws people in. It's a congruence between the belief of the artist, or in this case, the brand, and the belief of the people.
Yeah, and it's really just telling a story, doesn't necessarily bring people in unless it's grounded in something. And actually, that was the next thing I was going to ask you is, what does make a story meaningful?
So meaningful stories signal the idea that there's implied beliefs inside of the story. I mean, if you think about everything that is culturally driven, i.e. Religion, i.e. community, even nations, nationalities, ethnicities, the way that we ingrain and culturate people within these groups of people is we tell stories. We tell stories. That's how we learn to be good citizens in this world, right? Through folklore, we tell stories. That's how we learn what religions we're going to be a part of as children. We learn them through the stories, right? They're meaningful. That is that they are imbued with beliefs and values. So when you're telling stories about your journey, right? Your journey to living your best life, your healthiest life, right? Whether it's weight loss or just a different way of seeing the world, as you tell those stories, what's the ideology? What's the values that are tied into that? And it's that mythology that people buy into. And there's no words in the English language more powerful than once upon a time. Once upon a time, those stories we lean into. Stories are the currency by which we exchange ideas. It's through stories that we tell, and they spread, they propagate from person to person to person, which ultimately acts as an invitation to bring people in.
So let me just go back to what you said just prior, which is that ultimately the stories have to have this really foundational ideology that they're built off of. So how does an individual define their ideology? How do they make that crisp and clear and know that it's there always for them to tap into and to push out?
Yeah, ask yourself, what do you believe? And that may seem a bit esoteric, but you start with, how do I see the world? Like, what is my point of view on the world? And there's a lot of different ways to think about this. Like Simon Sinek talks about having a why, right? What's the why, the purpose, the ideology, right? The driving belief, the North Star. I always say that when you ask why 3 times, right? Well, I believe that, you should be healthy. Why do you believe that? Well, you should be healthy because you only got one body and you got to take good care of it. So why does that matter? Because you only got one life to live. So you should maximize life. Well, there you go. Right. And that's just, that's an arbitrary example. But as we ask why 3 times, at least 3 times, sometimes 5 times, as we ask why multiple times, we get beyond the surface and get to what's anchoring sort of everything about us, right? Like the ideologies that we hold, the beliefs that we hold, they are the frames for the world we live in. We make meaning of the world through our ideological frames. And if we understand that better, then we can be more intentional about the decisions that we make and, of course, the stories that we tell. And as coaches, it becomes very easy for us to preach the gospel, to communicate through the stories, through the mythology, so people go, man, I saw myself in that story you told. I experienced that. I experienced it. And I feel much more connected to you. Please tell me more. Like, we're social animals by nature, us human beings, as Aristotle would say. And stories are the way by which we relate. Stories are the things that we tell from person to person to person that not only connects us with individuals, but it brings more people together.
Yeah, and I think, when we've talked earlier, we talked about how, a story doesn't necessarily get told in one post.
Yeah,
Like, how do you build on a story? How do you keep people engaged over time? I think for some people they think like, okay, so, and you just defined that, gone through that exercise of asking 3 times of getting your ideology down so specific. It's like, how do you keep telling those stories and not feeling like your world is small or your story is short?
Yeah. I mean, look, you're right. I mean, we are complex people. We live dynamic lives, and we can't capture it all in one post. Right? Not one tweet isn't going to capture all of it. We're doing a sequential stories. We're telling multiple stories over a period of time. And I like the way one person puts it, that don't think about like the content you create as going to create content. Instead, think about it as like documenting your life, because the life that you live, the decisions that you make, how you show up in the world, these are all byproducts of the beliefs that you hold, right? And because I hold these beliefs, I show up in the world one way, right? Like Beyonce, because I believe in women's empowerment, these are the songs that I sing. Because I believe in women's empowerment, this is how I present myself to the world. This is how I talk. This is how I dress. This is how I behave. And the same thing goes with us. The only difference is that we probably haven't done the exercise to really identify why I do the things that I do, the ideologies that inform that. So once I identify that, I ask the why 3 times, sometimes 5 times. I get to the why, then I say, okay, let me just document my life. That is, I'll just talk. Or, hey, this is what I ate today. And we may say, oh my goodness, no one wants to hear what you ate today. But what you ate today is just the vehicle for the story. Why did you choose that meal? It may be, people say, you're no days off. Well, guess what? That's not living life to the fullest if that's your belief. So, today I'm going to treat myself, and you should treat yourself, right? Hashtag treat yourself. And the idea is that story, while in its shape seems like you're only sharing food, no, food is the vehicle by which you're preaching the gospel about your ideology. That's the powerful part.
And I think it's important, that the ideology doesn't have to be complex. It doesn't even have to be unique. It just has to be you. I think that, a lot of times, and I hear this a lot so often from coaches who, like 3 years into their life as a coach, they struggled those first 3 years. And I said, what was the difference? And they said, well, the first 3 years, I was trying to be somebody else. And then I finally realized that I should just be me.
Isn't that so? I mean, it's such a easy concept, but it's really hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really hard. I mean,
yeah.
I tell this all the time to students. They say, I'm getting ready for this interview. What should I say? What should I do? I tell them, just be yourself.
Yeah.
And they go, okay, but what self should I be so I get this job? It's like, how I should show up. It's like, be yourself, be who you are. It's a scary thing.
It is.
I think about my own self. I feel like I spent the majority of my life trying to fit in until I was brave enough to stand out, right? To really be myself. And the idea, to your point, is that it doesn't have to be super unique. It's just got to be real. People like realness. People like, people love Cardi B because Cardi B is going to be Cardi B, right? Like, it's just authenticity at its finest. We love that because oftentimes we feel like, I wish I could be that way. I wish I could. And as we see more people be vulnerable, as we see more people reveal, show a little thigh, not literally, but people, showing more of their life, people showing their mistakes, their wins, showing their regrets as well as their triumphs, it makes them feel like, hey, I experienced the exact same thing too, and I can do that as well. It's inviting. I mean, this is like the beauty of connectivity, that it influences other people to take action as well. And as coaches, that's ultimately what you're trying to do, right? We're encouraging people in hopes that they behave a certain way that's better for them, that's aligned with the Beachbody ideology.
I just, true confession, the last 2 years, I've been trying to be like Cardi B, and I now realize what's been going wrong. So I'm going to recenter. I'm going to ask myself those 3 questions. But but let's just, I want to go back now to just sort of, you're a practitioner, you work at a major ad agency. And so just some of those techniques, the techniques of telling a story, the techniques of maintaining a relationship with people through stories. What kind of advice do you have for coaches to keep those stories engaging and fresh?
So I'd say the first thing to do is identify what you believe, what the ideology is, find the tribe of people who see the world the way you do. Find your congregation, if you will, and then go preach the gospel to them. And then they will go preach your gospel to other people. They'll convert people on your behalf. So how do we do that? How do we make that happen? The first is think about this less than creating content to documenting your life. Just getting on first base. That's the first, and I'm telling you this as an individual as well. Like, making content and putting in the world can be a daunting task. It can feel like, oh my goodness, like, can I do this? Can I really do this? Do people really care? There's a lot of doubt that comes from that. We all feel it. The only way you get better at it is to do more of it. And you're going to keep doing it. And a year later, you're going to say, oh, that stuff I did at first is awful. That's fine. We all experience it. We all do it, right? But the first is just getting on first base. Don't think about creating content. Think about documenting your life. And those pieces that you create become vehicles for storytelling, i.e. what you ate. Even if it is your calendar, this is what I'm doing today. Your things to do list for today. And then speak about why it's meaningful, why it matters through the lens of your ideology of how you see the world. So don't create content, document your life. And as you get better at creating content, feeling more confident about putting things in the world, then you start thinking about, well, what are the storytelling vehicles that I might use? You know, some of the best storytellers I think about, like magazines, newspapers, Jimmy Fallon, even, right? They have franchises. They have an idea. One of my favorite is like History of Rap, where Jimmy Fallon and Justin Timberlake would get on stage, do a medley of old hip hop songs. And they do it for like 3 minutes and the crowd goes crazy. And every so often they bring Justin Timberlake back out, Jimmy Fallon do History of Rap Part 12. And it's this franchise that keeps going on and on and on. They build a scalable, repeatable device. And that allows you to create content at mass without having to come up with a new post every day.
It's interesting that you said that. I don't know, maybe some of you know, but in my old days, I used to be an actor. And in the old world of improvisation, there's an old commedia dell'arte term called a lazzi. And a lazzi was basically like, even though improvisation is all improvisation, you have this sort of bag of tricks, which was your lazzi bag, that you always knew you can pull out every once in a while to sort of control the flow of the story. And I imagine, just like you were talking about, the history of rap, that it's probably quite effective for coaches as they're telling these stories to kind of register what are those things that are getting the reaction, what's the style, and how do I know that occasionally I start to build this little toolbox, and it doesn't have to be filled with 1,000 things. It can be filled with 5 things, and that periodically you lay those things out.
Exactly. I do this thing every Friday. I do my own franchise that I call my favorite slide this week. So I take a slide out of the millions of slides that I create on a regular basis, whether it's for clients or for students in the classroom, and I just pick my favorite slide. Right? I use that slide and I post it on Fridays. That's what I post every Friday. And every Friday, if you follow me on any of the channels, we're friends on any of the channels, you see that slide. Well, why does that matter? Well, how does that align to Marcus's ideology? As I speak to myself in third person, I believe my ideology, my why, how I see the world is I believe that we're all put on this earth to serve. That's what I believe. We're here to serve. We're here to serve God and serve each other. That's my belief. And the way that I serve is by helping people realize the best version of themselves. I just so happen to teach. I just so happen to put advertising in the world, just so happen to give talks, right? But why I do it is to help people realize the best version of themselves, their full potential, the highest fidelity. And that's how I serve. One way I do that, I demonstrate that in the stories that I tell on Fridays. I show my favorite slide this week that has some information that's going to be helpful for you if what you need is aligned with that. This is how I serve. Right, so that's my bag of tricks, if you will.
Yeah, and I think that's great because I do think, you as a coach, we tell them all the time. We had a session yesterday and people were saying, look, you've got to show up every day on social media because that's your store, and if you don't show up, people think your store is closed. And
right.
and the reality is that when you think about that, showing up every day, your posts, filling up your stories, that can feel intimidating over, the long haul. But putting in these sort of like structural pieces, allows you to, create that framework, which makes it easier for you to create that content.
That's right. My wife reads Us Weekly every week. Every week she buys a new Us Weekly. And in every single one of those magazines, there is the look for less, who wore it best, hot or not. Every single one, right? And the structure is such. For who wore it best, they take a picture of one celebrity wearing an outfit and another celebrity wearing the same outfit. And they ask, who looks better in it? Who wore it best? And every week, that page is populated without even thinking. We know we're going to do a look for less. We know we're going to do a who wore it best. We know we're going to do a hot or not. 3 pages already populated. The same thing goes here where we're telling stories on our channels. What are those franchises? What is your look for less? What is your favorite slide this week? What is your history of rap that you can go to that becomes a storytelling vehicle that communicates your ideology?
So, just getting into storytelling, I know when we talked earlier, you talked about the RED framework.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes, perfect example. So what I tell my clients a lot, we talk about marketing communications and the stories we tell, they have to be relevant for the right people, right? This is this notion of what's your ideology? Who are the people who see the world the way you do? Preach the gospel to them. So we identify relevance. My ideologies align with these people. We see the world similarly. And the idea of me telling stories, to your point, like if you don't post regularly, people think your store is closed, right? Is creating memory structures that people associate to you. You establish memory structures in their mind so that they can be easily obtained, right? So we're creating cognitive ease. So it's relevant for the right people, R, creating memory structures that are easily obtained, E, and we do that by creating distinctive assets. And the distinctive creative assets is the storytelling franchise that you use, right? Best slide, my favorite slide this week, that is a distinctive asset that I create. History of rap, distinctive asset that Jimmy Fallon creates, right? Who wore it best, look for less, distinctive asset for Us Weekly, right? I have a video series that I created called Check the Rhyme, where I take hip hop lyrics and extract marketing insights from them, right? That's a distinctive creative asset. And the idea is that I'm preaching the gospel to people who see the world the way I do, and doing it in such a way, such a fidelity, such a prolific and pervasive way that memory structures are associated to me that are easily obtained cognitively. Red.
And again, those distinctive assets, though, they have to still fit within your ideology.
Exactly. I mean, everything is driven by the ideology. Relevance driven by the ideology. Distinctive assets, the creative assets, they're all demonstrative material ways to communicate your belief. It all starts there, right? Like you can't have a church without ideology, right? Like it's the belief that guides what we do, and it's also the belief that creates the front door that invites people to come in. It's ideological congruence. It's what we do. When we see the world similarly with people like us, we go, man, we should be friends, right? We're so alike, we should be friends. And we do this without even thinking. It's who we are. In the theory, it's like the psychology theory, it's referred to as homophily. That's like self-loving. We like people who are like ourselves. We like things that are like ourselves, right? And when people see the world the way we do, we see we have a lot in common. Like, we got to be the best of friends. You love Frank Ocean like I love Frank Ocean. Oh, we're going to be great friends, right? These are the things that connect us. And the stories that are informed by shared ideologies become the perfect mechanism to bring people close.
So what was the word, homophily?
Homophily, yeah.
Marcus, we have to talk at least once a month, because every time we talk, I learn at least one new word. So, which is really, really exciting for me. So
that's me trying to demonstrate my why.
so let me just go back to, again, what makes, and again, a story, it's not, a story isn't told in a single session. A story is told over a lifetime, but within telling that story, we can create these frameworks, these devices, these distinctive assets. But I want to talk also just a little bit about how do we keep those fresh and alive? And I know last time we talked a little bit about zigging and zagging.
Yeah. So you got to zag to the zig, right? You zag to the zig. I mean, this is the way we get to distinctiveness, right? People are going this way, we go that way. We get to distinctive way of showing up in the world. I wanted to double click on this idea of like, stories aren't told in one post. They're not told in one chapter. They're actually told over multiple chapters. If we think about the storytelling vehicles that last forever, that seem to go on and never end, they're like universes created around them, right? You think of Star Wars, you think of Marvel, you think of The Matrix, right? These are transmedia ways of telling stories. There's the movie, there's the video game, there's the anime series, there's the comic books, there's the toys, all these ways by which we tell stories. And the same thing goes for coaches. All the things that you do, these are all the many ways that you tell stories about who you are and what you're about. Most people don't do that. Most people don't tell stories in that way, which create a great opportunity for you to zag to the zig, to go left when everyone's going right, because those are the things that stand out in people's news feeds. As people are going through their Facebook timeline, just kind of passing through things, it's the things that feel super distinctive, like, whoa, what's this? Those things that get our attention. And when they're relevant, because they're ideologically congruent, people feel close to it.
That's great. And so, you know, it's funny, I think we had like, I don't know, 38,000 people or something register for our event here. I don't know how many are watching right now, but I know a lot of those 38,000 are coaches that are at the beginning of their coaching career. And they're looking at, you know, they've either been brought into the business by a coach who might have had more tenure, had been telling their story longer, have a bigger following on social media. And I can tell you that I know for a lot of them, they're intimidated. They're saying, like I'm looking at this person who just looks like a natural, has, you know, a ton of followers, and who am I? Like, who is going to follow me? So how do you get started with a brand and get to that point?
Everyone starts at zero. I mean, that's it's the most sobering thing to think about, that the people who have millions and gajillions of followers and everyone knows them, they all started at fan zero. They all started at subscriber zero. They all started at 0 likes, 0 customers. We all started at zero. And we build our community, we build our tribe over time. And it's hard to look at things in the timeline in which they happen. We only see them as they are today. The notion here is that you're going to go door to door developing, building your tribe, just like everybody else does. There is no elevator for this, right? There's those services where you can buy followers, right? But they're not real.
Yeah.
Just like you buy friends, they're not your real friends. The same thing goes here. You got to put in the work. But I tell you, when you put in the work, the people who show up, they really want to be there. They really believe. They really are into you. And you find when you do this, that when you get like your first comment, it feels like, man, this is a real thing. Like you feel like you're really connected and you're more inclined to engage with them. Like in these moments, you are really fortifying what it means to be a part of your tribe. You're fortifying what are the cultural characteristics of what it means to be a part of these communities. You start with zero, yeah, and that's okay, because everyone starts that way. And you build over time. Over time, you build. It just requires patience, consistency, and empathy.
And I think, you know, when we spoke last, you were telling me Beyonce's Beehive didn't just materialize overnight. As a matter of fact, you guys had a few rocky starts to get that brand off the ground.
Michael, this is one of my biggest failures, but biggest learnings as a marketer. So here's here's how the story goes. I'm running digital strategy for Beyonce, and our job was one of the many jobs was to help take her fan club that existed in the physical world, right, and turn it into an online fan club. Okay, great. We're going to find all those Beyonce fans out in the interwebs, and we're going to bring them all together. And at the time, we were calling this fan club the Beyontourage. Don't judge me. Beyontourage. It was a clever name. It was clever. It was clever then, right? You got Beyonce, Entourage, which was always associated with celebrities, right? Their people, their crew, their team. And Entourage, the television show on HBO, was pretty big at the time. It's like 2009. So you got Beyontourage. We were proud of ourselves. right? And we're building this community, at least trying to build this fan club by giving them access to content, giving them this and that. It was all very transactional, all around Beyonce, the artist, and her music. Little did we know that there was a community of Beyonce, quote unquote, fans that were already establishing themselves. And they were calling themselves the Beehive by themselves. We're doing nothing. They're doing this themselves. And they're amassing more and more and more people. And what we realized is that the activity that we're seeing online had nothing to do with what we were doing. It was all about them. So we cut bait on the Beyontourage and shifted our focus on helping facilitate the network of the Beehive. The Beehive, they had their own ideologies that was completely aligned with the ideologies of Beyonce. They had their own language, their own social norms, their own rules, right? And they acted in concert to promote social solidarity among them. And as a proxy for Beyonce and her brand, we just started to let's feed them. Let's help them come together. Let's facilitate them. Let's bring them closer in, right? Through the stories that she would tell beyond just her music, right? And this fandom, that we call it fandom, this tribe has grown to a point that there is a church service called the Beyonce Mass, both in San Francisco and New York. And Beyonce isn't the deity. They're not worshiping her, but they are looking at their religion through the lens of the ideologies of Beyonce, through the lens of women's empowerment. That is unbelievably powerful. This isn't about the music. This transcends the music. It's about ideology.
Yeah.
And again, like I said before, that was one of my biggest learnings in the zenith of my career, understanding how human behavior is associated with brand and how human behavior can be activated through a shared belief of the brand and the people.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that, so it's this community that formed too. So it's not just her voice, it's like her voice and the community are melding into one voice that is all connected to the same ideology.
That's right. That's right. It's all about the ideology.
And it just also, maybe it's obvious, but it's really important. I think that point that you said was that ultimately, kind of, you guys had a strategy. You were sort of saying, let's put this strategy out there. Let's go. Let's keep driving it. Let's keep driving. But ultimately, it was when you actually listened to the community that it started to take off. And I think it's really important because what that tells us is that storytelling is actually a two-way street.
That's right. That's right. I would argue that the idea isn't to be a storyteller, but to be a story starter. We start the story, and then we wait for the community or the next person to add on to the chapter. I mean, this is how dialogues go. I mean, now that I know that you're an actor, part of some improv, then you know this too.
Yeah.
You start and then you wait for the next person to go, and you guys volley back and forth. That's how we truly engage people. Not in one-way monologues. It's through a diatribe, right? It's through discourse.
Yes.
And when we're story starters, we realize that what we're doing is just sparking the dialogue. We're sparking the conversation with an ideological stimuli. And as people talk, we weigh in, we let them talk, we come back in, we let them talk. And maybe it's time for a new topic within the same sort of sphere identified by the same ideology. Right? But story starting versus storytelling becomes a switch that allows us to think about, oh, this isn't just us talking. These are people talking with us. So you can imagine then stories we may start, stories we may tell, might just be questions.
Yeah.
Feeling kind of this today. Anybody else out there feeling too? Oh, me too. I had the worst day. And these things begin to spark conversations and ultimately fortify community.
Yeah, that's great. Yesterday I was talking to two coaches, Deidre and Kate, and they use the analogy that on social, you can't just be a blogger, you have to be a business owner. And really what they meant by the business owner was that it's not just about you putting stuff out there, it's about knowing that everyone out there can also join. They can join the conversation.
That's right. There's a coach that I know personally. We went to school together. We went to college together. Her name is Keisha. She's amazing. And the stories that she tells, if you look at her feed, it just invites people in. At first, it started with when she started her journey. She was documenting her journey and telling her story. It went to people being like, "Go, Keisha, we're so proud of you. Like, go ahead. We're so," like, it was encouraging her, to people feeling like, you are encouraging me. Let me tell you about my story, Keisha. And it began to become dialogues between Keisha and the community, Keisha and the tribe. I mean, that's ultimately what we want to get to. Tribes are not one-way communications. They're communal. And communal requires discourse. So as you think about yourself as a person, as a brand, as a business, it all starts with people. All of it. It's all about people. I tell my students all the time, I tell my clients all the time, that if you don't understand people, then you don't understand business, because business is all about people. And the category that we're in is human by its very nature, which gives you, the coaches, so much liberty, so much opportunity to connect with people in meaningful ways, because we're starting from a very human starting point.
Yeah. Well, Marcus, what I've loved about our conversations is that you make everything simple. It doesn't have to be overcomplicated. Like I can tell you that, in the past, been with companies where you say, let's bring in an advertising company to help us define our brand. And for me, like, the most horrifying thing is when I come into a room and there's like a stack of Post-its that I know there's going to be some very painful hours-long exercise of writing words and putting them up on the wall. But I loved how you just sort of simplified it, that at its foundation, ideology, and then, creating structure, being consistent. But I guess rather than me do it, we got a few minutes left. If you can just go back and maybe just sort of quick rundown, quick highlights of what people should be thinking about as they're building their brands.
Absolutely. And I am a big fan of radical simplicity. So let's be radically simple. We start with, what do you believe? How do you see the world? What's your ideology, your why, your driving conviction? What's the thing that really gets you going, right? And it's really, really true that you believe. Then find the people who see the world the way you do, and you preach the gospel to them. You preach your ideology to them. And what happens is that the people who see the world the way you do will not only consume from you, they'll not only buy into what you're communicating, they'll go tell other people on your behalf. So how do we preach the gospel? That's simple. Start with the soul and end with the sale. Start with the soul. What do you believe, right? And we tell these stories, we start these stories in simple ways. You can start by just documenting your day and finding little vehicles you can use to tell a story today, tell a story tomorrow, tell a story on Wednesday, story on Thursday, and so on and so on and so on. Little bitty things. They don't have to be huge. They don't have to be beautiful, directed by David Fincher. They just have to be real. And slowly but surely, and I want to underscore surely, the people who see the world the way you do, they will come. You build it, they will come. But you got to find them first.
That's great. And I love that it starts with the soul. Like I always say that all the time, that, when I look at our successful coaches, their businesses are always built off of the transformations of the people, not the transactions of when they bought the product. And right. The ones that have that ongoing success, it's because those people have connected with them in a meaningful way, and they've influenced their lives. Well, Marcus, I have to tell you, I so thoroughly enjoy every opportunity that I have to speak to you. I hope, for the sake of my vocabulary, that we can continue these discussions. But really, I want to thank you for joining us today. It was really great, and I'm sure all of our coaches appreciate it. So thanks again for joining us.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. Be great, everyone.
All right. Take care, Marcus. All right. Well.